Buying or renting is very much a personal choice. For me, personally, I prefer to rent rather than to buy for all the freedom and flexibility. But in reality, I really need to respect the decision of my family. So what are the pros and cons of buying versus renting?
My family situation is the same. I prefer to rent, but my family prefers ownership. So every one of us have our reasons, but since this is a purchase that is for our own use and for our own enjoyment, then the financial calculations as well as the profitability of whether you are buying or you're renting, that comes as a secondary consideration. The first consideration should be the family's comfort and happiness. So when we compare them on a financial basis, then ownership incurs a lot of upfront costs, cost of acquisition, the stamp duties, renovation costs. Then there's the ongoing cost of maintaining your property. So there's the MCST bills to pay, there's the property taxes to pay. Upfront cost itself could be equal to maybe 2 to 3 years of rental. If you are able to rent a property at 2% per annum yield, for example, those that are in districts 9 and 10 freehold, the 4% stamp duty that you pay is actually equal already to 2 years of rental if the annual rental returns is just 2%. In the case of rental, the cons would be that there is not so much stability. In case your owner decides that he would need to use the property, he might serve you notice to quit at the end of your tenancy agreement, or your owner might, in the middle of your tenancy period, decide that he wanted to sell his property, and then he'll be organizing viewings for people to come and look at the property. That may disrupt your family's peace and enjoyment. So for those who are looking at staying at a place for 10 to 15 years and without disrupting too much of the family, the stability of a home ownership outweighs the rental part of the equation. But for those of us who really just wanted to focus on the numbers, whether it's financially more prudent to own or to rent, then on the numbers part, rentals give you additional benefits that ownership doesn't. Ownership incurs usually a home loan, which is a monthly commitment to pay off to the bank, which means that your jobs have got to be really stable. You can't be disrupted off your job 5 years into your 20-year loan. Secondly, ownership also requires most of us to take out money from our CPF to put into the home as equity, but that CPF that is taken out immediately stops earning the 2.5% annual interest that CPF would be paying us. And therefore, in the case of a rental, you are actually able to earn the 2.5% CPF, which compounded over a 15-20-year period actually is a significant amount of money. So when we start to balance these numbers between rental and buying, we will see quite a few differences between the two scenarios.
Home ownership is a Singapore dream. Singapore has the world's second highest home ownership rate of 91.5%. Under what circumstances do you recommend people to buy versus to rent?
We are running a workshop in May where we will be sharing an entire spreadsheet with the two scenarios. One scenario showing a 5-year ownership, another scenario showing a 5-year rental for a same family who is considering renting or owning. And in that spreadsheet, we will run through all the costs and benefits of both scenarios, and we would then help investors and homeowners to understand what is the pros and cons of ownership versus renting. All the cost items, all the revenue items would be available for calculation. In the case of rental, the additional benefits would be that you are only paying out the money not in one lump sum. Although you are not able to use CPF to pay your rentals, the cash that you have on hand would be paid out on a monthly basis without having you to also pay the property taxes and the MCST fees. And those fees and charges, including property taxes, may increase over the next few years, but your rental agreement has already locked in your rents for 2 years at a stretch. So we will be comparing these scenarios. But for homeowners, my recommendation actually is if you are sufficiently wealthy that you can buy a home with cash and with a loan, without touching your CPF preferably, and you still have sufficient savings, which during in times of difficult times of a job disruption, you have sufficient savings that you can then pay off your home loan in full, such that you are unencumbered. Then such types of home buying investment would be most prudent, because with the technology disrupting our jobs these days, we don't know when we have our income being stopped. But most homeowners today are not thinking that way. For people who are buying their own homes, they're thinking that, well, I can use $500,000 to buy my home with another $500,000 of loan, but the other $500,000 that I have, I'm going to put it into an investment property. Now that is really doubly overstretching it. Firstly, you're stretching on the one hand your own owner-occupied home with a loan, where in case of a job disruption, you are unable to satisfy the monthly mortgage payments. On another hand, with your spare cash of $500,000, you're going to be taking another loan to buy an investment property. Now, when the market crashes, not only will your salary be disrupted, your tenants may not be able to pay you rentals, and your tenants might start to quit on you as well. So you are having to then service 2 home loans, while at the same time your income streams are being stopped. So that would be a situation that would totally discourage.
For the next 5 years, do you recommend people to rent or to buy, and why?
Within the next 5 years, given the current situation of apparently a little bit of an oversupply, where rentals are still sort of declining in the overall trend, we think that the argument for rental would be stronger. And in fact, that turns out to be so, especially if we included the upfront cost of acquisition of the stamp duties, as well as your renovation costs. And then interest expenses in the next 5 years are probably going to be higher and higher, given that the very low period of interbank rates are probably over. So ownership costs may be increasing, while the cost of rentals in the next 5 years may be decreasing with all these oversupply worries. So the argument for the next 5 years seems to be leaning towards rentals. But again, we welcome learners to join our workshop so that we can look through the spreadsheet and look at the details of whether ownership is beneficial versus rentals. Over the next 5 years, if we see a situation where during economic disruption that home prices come down much faster than rentals are, in that case, that could mean a buying signal where ownership then outweighs the benefits of renting.